Spring 1865. In the foggy hollows of the Arkansas Ozarks, children vanished, one by one, into the old stone well. Imagine standing there, the cold earth beneath your feet, silence pressing against your chest. Laughter turned to nothing. What dark force could take innocence so completely? And the question no one dared speak aloud, what truly waits in the shadows of that well? The villagers whispered of shadows too dark to name, of cries that vanished before reaching ears. Parents feared the forest itself had turned against them, a silent predator watching every step. Something unseen lurked beneath the surface of their everyday lives, twisting innocence into terror. And yet, even as the fear grew, no one could stop the disappearances, or the growing sense that the well held secrets far older and darker than anyone dared imagine. Welcome to Shadows of True History, where we uncover the darkest secrets hidden in plain sight. Do you have the courage to follow me into the foggy hollows of the Ozarks and hear what really happened? Subscribe, comment your location, and join the bravest souls who dare to walk this path with me. Because once we step closer to the well, there's no turning back, and the story only grows darker from here. In 1865, the Arkansas Ozarks were a land of dense forests, winding creeks, and mist-covered hills that seemed to hold secrets in every shadow. Life here moved slowly, measured by the rise and fall of the sun and the endless work of tilling soil, chopping wood, and tending livestock. Families lived in small wooden cabins, their lives intertwined with the rhythms of nature and the fragile bonds of a tight-knit community. Children ran barefoot along narrow paths, their laughter echoing across valleys, while the smell of damp earth, burning wood, and fresh rain lingered in the air. But beneath the surface of this tranquil life, the scars of war still lingered. Men returned broken from distant battlefields, towns were stretched thin with loss, and a quiet unease settled over every home. Isolation was a constant companion, and the forest that provided food and firewood also hid danger, rattlesnakes, sudden storms, and the unknown lurking just beyond the tree line. The wells scattered across the hollows were lifelines, providing water for drinking, cooking, and washing. They were simple stone-lined circles sunk deep into the earth, yet to the villagers they held a silent presence, a witness to everyday life, and soon to a horror that no one could have imagined. It was here near one such well that children began to vanish, leaving behind whispers, fear, and a mystery that would haunt the Ozarks for generations. In every quiet town, there are faces people trust without question, faces that hide shadows. In the Ozarks of 1865, those shadows belonged to the men who managed the well and the surrounding forest lands. On the surface, they were pillars of the community, hardworking, polite, and generous with their advice or a helping hand. Neighbors spoke of their generosity and steady presence, unaware that beneath their calm exteriors lay a chilling, calculated darkness. These men were clever, patient, and meticulous. They knew the woods better than anyone, the hidden paths and secret hollows where no one dared wander alone. To the villagers, they were protectors of tradition and safety, but in truth they were predators cloaked in respectability. Children instinctively trusted them. After all, the townsfolk themselves did. And it was that trust, that unquestioned belief in their decency, that made the disappearances possible. Every smile, every gentle word, every offer to guide a child to play near the well-masked intentions no parent could imagine. Their power lay not only in secrecy but in manipulation, in bending the perception of the community until horror could hide in plain sight. These men were not monsters that roared and attacked openly. They were quiet, calculating, and patient, the kind of evil that slips in unnoticed, leaving devastation behind. In a town already wary from the echoes of war, explanations were welcomed, no matter how thin. The men at the center of the disappearances were careful to craft a story the villagers could easily believe. When children went missing, it was whispered that they had wandered too far into the forest, that wolves or misadventure had claimed them, or that illness had taken them silently in the night. Each explanation was plausible, comforting even, offering parents a reason that kept terror at bay. The well itself became a symbol of everyday life, a mundane feature that encouraged the townsfolk to look past suspicion. Children play near it all the time without harm, they were told, reassured that accidents, while tragic, were part of life. Even the authorities leaned on these simple tales, repeating them without question, cementing a collective belief that nothing sinister lurked beneath the surface. Yet the truth was far darker. The stories worked precisely because they were ordinary. They distracted attention from the quiet manipulation occurring day after day. The men's outward respectability became their shield. No one imagined the trusted caretakers of the town's children were capable of hiding such calculated evil. And as the cover story spread, parents' dread simmered beneath polite nods and murmured sympathy, unaware that the real danger was never in the shadows. It was smiling back at them in the light of day. Beneath the surface of the village's ordinary life, a hidden network existed, silent, untraceable, and chilling in its efficiency. The men behind the disappearances had turned the landscape itself into a tool of control. The well was only one element. Secret paths wound through the forest, hidden alcoves and hollowed logs providing concealed passage. And even the abandoned cabins scattered on the hillside served as observation points. Every detail was calculated, every feature of the land exploited to keep their crimes invisible. No one knew the well had been modified, deepened beyond any practical need, reinforced to prevent any accidental discovery. Its edges were camouflaged with moss and brush, natural to the untrained eye but deliberately designed to hide what lay beneath. The men had created a system of signals, whistles, knocks, and coded gestures that allowed them to move silently, coordinating without arousing suspicion. Even the dogs that roamed the area seemed indifferent, trained or instinctively aware not to disturb the operation. This infrastructure was more than just physical, it was psychological. Fear and distraction were woven into the daily routines of the villagers. Gossip, false leads, and convenient accidents kept eyes away from the truth. Parents grew anxious but powerless, believing that the forest itself was the enemy. And all the while, the men watched, waiting, confident that the hidden machinery they had built would keep their darkness safe from discovery, as if the entire town were a stage set for a secret performance no one was meant to see. Whenever villagers noticed strange occurrences, footprints that led nowhere, faint cries swallowed by the wind, or children returning home with stories they couldn't fully explain, there was always a ready answer. Officials, local clergy, and respected townsfolk offered explanations that were tidy, plausible, and comforting. "It's the forest," they would say. "Wild animals and the unpredictable land, nothing more." The same voices dismissed shadows as tricks of the fog or tired eyes, insisting that panic only worsened the danger. Even the well, a silent witness to disappearances, was deemed harmless. If a parent questioned its depth or the echoes that seemed unnatural, they were told it was a normal, deep stone well used by generations. Any suggestion of foul play was met with polite concern or quiet ridicule, as if the mere thought of intentional harm was an affront to the community. The explanations were not just convenient, they were authoritative, backed by those people trusted most. This careful framing lulled the villagers into a false sense of security, turning fear into resignation. Oddities were rationalized, anomalies became forgotten, and questions that dared probe too deeply were discouraged. And behind the comfort of these official explanations, the men orchestrating the disappearances continued their work, knowing the well, the forest, and the community itself were perfectly aligned to hide their crimes. No operation of this darkness could succeed alone. Hidden in plain sight, there was always someone who enabled it, a quiet hand guiding the machinery without ever being seen. In the Ozarks, it was the local school teacher, a figure trusted by all, whose gentle voice and patient demeanor masked a mind carefully attuned to the men's secrets. To the villagers, they were an upstanding citizen, devoted to children's learning and welfare. But in truth, they were the unseen eyes, the one who noticed small patterns, who ensured questions never reached dangerous conclusions. The collaborator's role was subtle. They were the first to redirect attention when a parent asked too many questions. The one who suggested a child's disappearance might simply be a wandering misadventure. In meetings, their calm words reinforced the forest and accident narrative. On certain mornings, they would be seen walking near the well, ostensibly tending to the school garden, but in reality observing, noting, and reporting to the men orchestrating the horror. Their complicity was not born of fear alone, it was calculated. They understood that the town's trust gave them power, that every whispered rumor they dispelled made the men's work easier. And as the children vanished, one after another, the collaborator remained a quiet, smiling presence, ensuring that no one outside the inner circle ever glimpsed the full extent of the darkness lurking beneath the well. The children who disappeared were not just numbers on a ledger, they were vibrant lives full of innocence and hope, each one leaving a distinct void in the tight-knit community. They played barefoot along narrow dirt paths, chased fireflies in the dusk, and laughed with a freedom adults had long forgotten. Some were siblings, bound together by shared curiosity. Others were orphans, known to all in the village as bright, trusting faces. Their daily routines were ordinary, fetching water, helping mothers in the garden, skipping stones along the creek. But in that ordinary rhythm, the men who lurked in the shadows found opportunity. Parents described them in whispers: the child who always carried a small wooden toy, the one whose laughter could fill a room, the quiet one who loved to draw in the dirt with a stick. Each had a life uniquely their own, and each had someone who would notice if they were late, someone who would search frantically when they never returned. Their vulnerabilities were simple: youth, trust, and the natural inclination to follow adults who appeared kind and safe. It was this very innocence, this unquestioning faith in the grown-ups they relied upon, that made them easy targets. And as families clutched empty hands and hearts, the town slowly realized that the well was more than just a hole in the ground. It was a doorway into an unfathomable, creeping darkness, claiming lives and leaving grief in its wake. No secret can remain hidden forever, and in the shadow of the Ozarks, that truth revealed itself through the eyes of a single accidental witness. Young Samuel Thompson, barely 12, had been wandering the edge of the forest one late afternoon, gathering firewood for his mother. He was careful, obedient, and cautious, but that day curiosity drew him further than usual, past familiar paths, until he stumbled upon a hidden alcove near the well. What he saw made his blood run cold. Two men, faces familiar from the village, were not simply playing near the well, they were orchestrating something deliberate, something terrible. Samuel's small hands froze around the sticks he carried as he watched shadows move and whispered instructions pass between them. A child no older than Samuel himself was guided toward the well, coaxed with promises and gentle words that masked menace. Samuel wanted to run, to cry out, but fear rooted him to the spot. When the men finally noticed a rustle in the underbrush, they glanced in his direction, and for a heartbeat, Samuel felt the full weight of discovery. But he slipped behind a tree, heart hammering as the men returned to their dark work, unaware of the witness who had seen too much. Samuel's mind raced. How could he tell anyone what he had seen without becoming a target himself? Every adult he considered trusting seemed now part of the very darkness he had glimpsed, and as the sun dipped below the treetops, casting the forest in a shadowed gloom, he realized the horror was no longer distant, it was immediate, patient, and waiting for the moment to strike again. Samuel Thompson returned home that evening with his small body trembling and his mind racing. The forest seemed alive with whispers, the well itself looming in his memory like a dark eye watching him. At dinner, he struggled to speak, to convey what he had seen, but words failed him. How could a child explain that familiar men, trusted, respected, were capable of such horror? His parents noticed only his pale face and trembling hands, attributing it to fear of the forest or an overactive imagination. The village, already tense with anxiety over missing children, could not entertain Samuel's claims. Whispers spread of his wild tales, and elders dismissed them as youthful exaggeration, warning him not to frighten himself or others. Even Samuel's closest friends looked at him differently, unsure what to believe, uncertain whether to comfort him or fear him. Isolation compounded his trauma. Every creak of a floorboard, every rustle in the trees, every echo from the well reminded him that the men were still at work, their reach unbroken. Yet inside him the truth burned bright. Samuel could not forget the frightened child being guided toward the well, the men's quiet smiles, and the absolute control they exerted. Denial by the adults did not erase what he had seen. It only deepened his terror, leaving him alone with the knowledge that the horrors the town refused to acknowledge were very real and very close. He learned quickly that witnessing evil did not guarantee safety. In fact, the act of seeing made him a target, a silent participant in a conspiracy of shadows that stretched across the hollows, touching every life in ways the villagers could not yet comprehend. When reports of disappearing children reached local authorities, an official inquiry was convened, but its purpose was more performance than justice. The town's elders and lawmen, many of whom had long-standing ties to the men orchestrating the horrors, conducted interviews with solemn faces and careful words. Questions were asked, notes were taken, and promises of vigilance were made. To outsiders, it seemed the village was taking the matter seriously. To those who watched closely, it became clear that every step was designed to maintain appearances, not to uncover the truth. Witnesses like young Samuel Thompson were met with skepticism. Their accounts were questioned, subtly undermined with gentle suggestions that imagination or exaggeration might be at work. Any evidence that might point toward foul play, footprints leading to the forest, strange noises in the night, the children's last known locations, was dismissed as coincidence or natural hazard. The authorities provided the perfect cover, plausible deniability wrapped in bureaucratic procedure. Even parents, desperate for answers, found themselves doubting their own instincts. When a sheriff nodded gravely and offered calm explanations, fear gave way to reluctant acceptance. The inquiry functioned less as an investigation and more as a mechanism to quiet unrest, leaving the village reassured yet none the closer to discovering the truth. Behind closed doors, the men responsible watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Their carefully maintained network of deceit had shielded them from scrutiny once more, reinforcing the illusion that the disappearances were tragic accidents rather than the work of methodical, calculated evil. The forest, the well, and the men in authority remained aligned, their sinister operations untouched by the very system designed to expose them. Not all children who encountered the darkness vanished entirely. Some returned, though forever changed, bearing the mark of what they had endured. These survivors were living testaments to the horrors hidden in the well and the surrounding forest, eyes wide with memory too heavy for their age, bodies trembling with residual fear, and voices stammering as if even speech could summon the terror back. Their innocence had been stolen, replaced by an understanding no child should ever possess. The villagers noticed the differences immediately. A once cheerful child now flinched at shadows, a gentle smile replaced by distant silence. Some avoided sunlight, afraid of what it might reveal, while others whispered about things adults could neither see nor comprehend. Even casual conversation revealed gaps, sudden hesitations, and glances over shoulders that no ordinary fear could explain. These children became unintentional messengers of the hidden crimes, their altered behavior hinting at the events that authority had refused to acknowledge. Parents tried to shield them, yet the world beyond the household demanded questions. Teachers, neighbors, and relatives all noticed fragments of truth leaking through, the panic in a stare, the knowledge of secrets no one would confess. Yet every time someone pressed for clarity, the men responsible were nearby, calm and composed, reinforcing the idea that everything was normal. And so the altered children carried a dual existence. They survived physically, but their minds bore witness to horrors unseen by the rest of the community. Each glance they cast toward the well, each hesitant step near the forest, was a reminder that evil need not be loud to be devastating. Its quiet persistence left scars that no one could erase, making the invisible horrors undeniable, if only someone dared to see. The darkness behind the well was not random, it was calculated. The men responsible approached their crimes with a methodical precision that turned horror into a cold, almost clinical operation. Every disappearance followed a pattern: the timing, the placement near the well, the carefully constructed distractions that drew parents and neighbors away. It was a system designed not only to conceal, but to study, to refine, and to manipulate. They observed their victims closely, noting tendencies, routines, and vulnerabilities. Which children were most likely to follow instructions without fear? Who could be isolated without raising suspicion? Even the accidental witness, Samuel, became a variable in their experimentation. Every response, every hesitation, every glance of curiosity or fear was noted and used to perfect the process. The men employed tools and methods that seemed mundane but were meticulously arranged. Simple ropes, hidden ladders, and reinforced walls turned the well into a mechanism capable of controlling both the physical and psychological state of the children. Notes, markings, and coded signals allowed coordination over distances, ensuring no misstep could expose the operation. The forest itself was leveraged as a laboratory of control, using isolation, sound, and natural concealment to their advantage. To the untrained eye, it appeared accidental, chaotic, but the reality was precise. Every element, every routine, every interaction was orchestrated to maintain secrecy while maximizing psychological impact. It was a system of evil disguised as order, turning the innocent into living data and the well into both trap and study. And as Samuel pieced together what he had seen, he realized that this methodology was more than just calculated. It was deliberate, patient, and horrifyingly human. Every story of darkness requires someone willing to face it, and in the Ozarks of 1865, that person was Abigail Turner. A woman of quiet resolve, Abigail had returned to the village after years spent teaching in distant towns, carrying with her a sharp mind, unyielding curiosity, and a sense of justice that would not be silenced. She was no stranger to hardship. The scars of war and loss had shaped her into someone who noticed what others overlooked, who questioned what others accepted without hesitation. Abigail observed the town with careful eyes. She saw the fear in parents' faces, the unnatural silences of the children who had returned, and the strange patterns surrounding the old stone well. Unlike many, she refused to accept the official explanations or the comforting lies whispered by authority figures. Something was profoundly wrong, and she knew instinctively that uncovering the truth would demand courage, patience, and a willingness to confront forces that others preferred to ignore. Her personal stakes were high. A niece she adored had nearly disappeared herself, saved only by a sudden distraction that pulled her from danger's edge. That close call burned in Abigail's heart, fueling a determination that bordered on obsession. She would not allow the well or the men behind it to continue claiming lives unchecked. Abigail's presence in the village was quiet at first, blending in with the routine of daily life. But behind her gentle smile and polite demeanor, a relentless investigator stirred, one who would follow the trail of secrets wherever it led, risking reputation, relationships, and even her own safety to confront the darkness lurking in the shadows. Abigail Turner did not confront the darkness openly. She moved within it, careful and deliberate, like a shadow herself. She watched, listened, and noted every pattern, every deviation from ordinary life. Daily routines became clues: which children were missing, who escorted them near the well, and how the villagers responded or failed to respond. She pieced together whispers, half-spoken fears, and unexplained silences into a map of the hidden horror. She began to gain the trust of those closest to the perpetrators. A casual word here, a shared concern there, allowed her to observe the men in moments they believed private. Abigail learned to read the subtle signals, the way they exchanged glances, the small gestures that communicated instructions, the controlled, almost rehearsed actions that revealed a chilling routine. Every observation was a risk, yet each one brought her closer to the truth. Abigail also sought out the altered children, those who had returned from the well. Speaking to them gently, listening to fragmented memories, and observing their reactions. She began to assemble a story the town refused to acknowledge. Their fear and trauma became her guide, illuminating details the men had carefully concealed. As days passed, Abigail's resolve strengthened. She realized that exposing this network would require not only courage but careful orchestration. She needed proof, evidence that could withstand the skepticism of the townsfolk and the authority figures who had turned a blind eye. Every moment she spent in their world, every silent observation, was a step closer to unraveling the methodical evil lurking beneath the forest and the well, a darkness no one else had dared confront. Now I want you to pause and picture this: a misty forest, an old stone well, and the weight of silence pressing down around you. Imagine standing there knowing that children vanished into that darkness, and the very people you trusted were orchestrating it. Can you feel it? The cold dread creeping up your spine? This is where the story turns truly chilling. Abigail Turner, our relentless truth seeker, is about to step closer to the horrors that have haunted this town for months. But here's the question: can you handle what comes next? Can you bear witness to the secrets that no adult dared speak aloud? The evidence that proves the disappearances were no accident? If you do, then you must join this investigation fully. Comment below where you're watching from, subscribe to Shadows of True History, and step into the story with us. Every detail you will hear, every shadow you will glimpse is real, woven from history and horror. And trust me, the moments ahead will haunt you long after the screen goes dark. Abigail's patience finally bore fruit. Late one evening, she followed a hidden trail near the well, guided by the faint echoes of whispered instructions she had observed for weeks. Her heart pounded in rhythm with each careful step, every shadow a potential threat. Then, in a small, concealed alcove beneath the forest floor, she found it, proof that could no longer be ignored. There were scraps of clothing, toys, and crude markings etched into the stone, silent witnesses of the children's vanished lives. Each item told a story Abigail could piece together, a tapestry of horror that matched the whispers and fragmented accounts she had gathered. But the most damning evidence lay in the men's meticulous records, hidden in a hollowed log, lists of names, dates, and instructions detailing the children's movements near the well. The meticulousness chilled her. This was not the work of impulse, but of calculated design. As she studied the evidence, fear surged through her. She knew the men would notice any intrusion. That discovery could mean death. Yet the truth demanded exposure. Abigail understood the stakes. She was now the keeper of knowledge, the one who could unmask the horror that had haunted the village for months. With trembling hands, she gathered the items and records, knowing that these fragments of evidence would either bring justice or place her directly in the path of darkness. Abigail barely had time to grasp the evidence before a shadow moved among the trees. The men had discovered her intrusion, their quiet patience replaced by sudden predatory alertness. Heart-hammering, she fled along the narrow forest path she had memorized, clutching the stolen records and fragments of proof close to her chest. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves set her nerves alight. The forest that had been her ally now seemed alive with threat. Behind her, footsteps followed, measured and relentless. Abigail darted through underbrush, leapt over hidden roots, and scaled a small ridge, using every ounce of strength and knowledge of the terrain to stay ahead. The fog hung thick, hiding her from view, yet also obscuring the path, forcing her to rely on instinct and memory. At one point, a hand almost grazed her shoulder, sending a surge of terror through her. She stumbled but pressed on, knowing that capture would mean certain death and the permanent silencing of the truth. The chase felt endless, the forest a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Yet Abigail's determination burned brighter than fear. Every step, every breath brought her closer to survival, closer to bringing the evidence to light, and closer to the moment when the village would finally face the darkness that had haunted it for far too long. Exhausted, battered, and trembling, Abigail finally emerged from the forest into the dimly lit streets of the nearby town. The weight of the evidence pressed against her chest, yet the sense of relief was fleeting. She had survived the forest, but the battle for truth was only beginning. She approached the local authorities, hoping that the proof she carried would finally unmask the men responsible for the disappearances. But reality struck with a cruel force. Officials, many bound by long-standing loyalty or fear, met her with polite skepticism. Notes and lists. The fragments of children's lives were dismissed as misinterpretation, exaggeration, or coincidence. Whispers in her ears suggested that her own credibility might be questioned, that the villagers preferred the comfort of ignorance to the terror of truth. Abigail felt the familiar weight of isolation. The truth, she realized, was more dangerous than even the forest because it challenged the very foundations of the community. The evidence she carried could topple reputations, shatter trust, and ignite fear, but without acknowledgement it remained powerless. Yet she refused to retreat. Determined, she planned her next steps, knowing that persistence, courage, and careful strategy were the only paths forward. The reversal was not that the forest had lost, it was that civilization, too, had to confront its own blindness before justice could reach the shadows of the well. With mounting determination, Abigail enlisted a small group of allies, villagers who, like her, had begun to question the official narratives. Together, they planned a raid on the well and the hidden structures surrounding it, moving carefully to avoid alerting the men responsible. As they approached, the forest seemed to hold its breath, shadows stretching and twisting along the undergrowth. When they finally breached the concealed alcove, the full scale of the horror revealed itself. The well, now stripped of camouflage, exposed its deep, cruel design. Hidden chambers beneath it contained remnants of the children's lives, small toys, tattered clothing, crude markings etched into the stone walls. The air was thick with decay and the lingering scent of fear, as if the darkness itself had taken shape. Each discovery confirmed what Abigail had long feared. This was not the work of impulsive evil, but a methodical, patient orchestration. The men's meticulous records, hidden passages, and tools of control lay exposed, undeniable evidence of their calculated crimes. The villagers who accompanied her recoiled in shock, their disbelief giving way to horror as the reality of the chamber sank in. For the first time, the darkness that had haunted the town was made visible. The well, the forest, and the hidden infrastructure could no longer hide the truth. The Chamber of Horrors was no longer a secret, and justice, though delayed, had finally found a foothold. With the chamber exposed, the true faces behind the horror could no longer hide behind polite smiles and the veneer of respectability. Abigail and the villagers identified the men orchestrating the disappearances, figures once trusted, now revealed as predators of the highest cunning. Their calm exteriors shattered under scrutiny, revealing arrogance, fear, and the faintest flickers of regret, though too late to undo the damage. The schoolteacher, previously a silent enabler, was confronted with the evidence of complicity. Every gesture, every whispered instruction that had kept the operation running smoothly came to light. The villagers recoiled as Abigail recounted the meticulous methodology, the hidden signals, and the manipulation that had allowed children to vanish without immediate notice. Names, dates, and documented instructions, once secret, pinned the responsibility squarely upon their shoulders. This unmasking went beyond physical identification. It revealed the psychology behind the crimes, patience, manipulation, and calculated cruelty disguised as benevolence. Friends and neighbors, once blinded by trust, now understood the depth of deception. Shock, disbelief, and sorrow rippled through the village as the truth crystallized. Evil had lived among them quietly, waiting for the right moment to strike. Abigail, standing before the unmasked villains, realized the importance of documentation and exposure. Without proof and courage to confront them, the horror would have continued unseen, a secret etched into the forest and the well, carried silently by every frightened child who survived. As the evidence unfolded, it became chillingly clear that the horrors of the Ozarks were not isolated. Abigail discovered letters, coded messages, and shipments of materials suggesting a network that extended far beyond the forested hills of Arkansas. The men responsible were not mere local predators. They were part of a larger organized system that exploited children across regions, using the village and its well as a small but critical node in a terrifyingly methodical chain. Maps and documents hinted at distant locations where similar disappearances had occurred, with instructions on concealment, observation, and manipulation copied with precision. Each connection revealed a disturbing reality. The local events were only a fragment of a calculated operation, a network of secrecy designed to evade law, oversight, and suspicion. Abigail realized that uncovering the full extent of the network would require courage, coordination, and relentless investigation. The revelation shocked the villagers. What they had thought was tragic but contained was actually part of something far more sinister and global. The well, the forest, and the village had been chosen not randomly but strategically, a testing ground for methods applied elsewhere. This scope transformed the horror from local misfortune into a calculated system of human cruelty, a truth so vast and dark that it challenged everything the community believed about safety, trust, and the ordinary lives they thought they knew. Even as the Chamber of Horrors was exposed, Abigail uncovered another layer of the tragedy, a deliberate societal conspiracy of silence. Villagers, officials, and even clergy had played roles in maintaining appearances, dismissing concerns, and turning a blind eye to what was unfolding. Fear, loyalty, and self-preservation had intertwined to create a protective shield around the men responsible, allowing the disappearances to continue unchecked for months. Rumors were quietly suppressed, conversations redirected, and skeptical voices silenced with gentle warnings or quiet ridicule. The forest and the well had been aided by the very people meant to guard the town, their collective denial creating a wall around the truth. Parents, friends, and neighbors, constrained by social expectation, fear of scandal, and trust in authority, were complicit in unknowingly enabling the horror. Abigail realized that exposing the men was only one part of the battle. To prevent future tragedies, the community itself had to confront its own failures, the willful ignorance, the whispered reassurances, the reluctance to see what was hiding in plain sight. The conspiracy of silence was not merely passive, it was an active force woven into the fabric of the village that had allowed evil to flourish quietly, patiently, and invisibly. This revelation transformed the narrative. The horror was not only in the forest and the well, but in the collective choices of a society unwilling to face uncomfortable truths. Once the chamber was exposed and the evidence undeniable, the wheels of justice began to turn, though slowly and imperfectly. The men orchestrating the horrors faced the scrutiny of the law and the community's anger. Some were arrested swiftly, their reputation shattered, their authority stripped away. Trials followed, and the weight of their crimes became public knowledge. Yet even in punishment, there was no true atonement for the lives they had stolen or the innocence they had destroyed. The complicit schoolteacher and other enablers were also confronted. Some expressed regret, though it rang hollow against the evidence of deliberate collaboration. Others clung to denial, claiming coercion or ignorance, but their proximity to the horrors and knowledge of the methodology made their defense almost impossible to believe. Abigail Turner, the hero who had risked everything, emerged not unscathed but resolute. She carried the scars of her journey, fear, exhaustion, and the lingering memory of the children, but also the satisfaction of having unmasked the evil that hid in plain sight. The villagers, now aware of the full scope of deception and complicity, were left to reconcile grief, anger, and relief. Justice had been pursued, yet the tragedy left permanent marks. The forest and the well remained, silent reminders of what had occurred and of the fragile line between vigilance and blindness in a community that almost looked away. The events in the Ozarks left a legacy that stretched far beyond the forest and the well. For the village, the memory of the children who disappeared, of the altered survivors, and of the men who had hidden in plain sight, became a cautionary tale whispered from one generation to the next. Abigail Turner's courage ensured that the truth was not buried, but the emotional scars on the community remained deep and unhealed. The moral was stark. Evil can exist quietly, often protected by the ordinary routines of life, the trust of neighbors, and the unwillingness of society to confront uncomfortable truths. Silence, complicity, and fear had allowed darkness to grow, and only vigilance, courage, and relentless pursuit of truth could challenge it. Abigail's heroism demonstrated the power one individual holds when refusing to accept appearances at face value. But the story also served as a reminder that history often repeats itself. The well, the forest, and the network of deception may be specific to this time and place, but the lessons extend universally: to protect the vulnerable, to question authority when necessary, and to speak out even when it is dangerous or unpopular. The village of the Ozarks would never forget, and neither should we, that ignoring evil is an invitation for it to flourish. Now take a moment and picture it: the forest, the well, the shadows that hid horrors for months. Imagine the fear, the silence, and the careful deception that kept an entire village from seeing the truth. Could something like this happen today? Would we even notice before it was too late? These are not just questions of history, they are warnings, whispered across generations, demanding our attention. Abigail Turner's bravery revealed the evil that lurked in plain sight, but her story reminds us that darkness often thrives where vigilance falters. The children of the Ozarks, their innocence stolen and their lives forever altered, are a testament to the cost of silence, fear, and blind trust. And as you sit here watching, the question remains: would you see it? Would you act? If you have the courage to continue seeking the truth, join the investigation. Subscribe to Shadows of True History. Comment below your thoughts and step into the shadows with us. Every story we uncover carries lessons, warnings, and the echoes of lives affected. And for those willing to follow closely, our next story will take us to the frozen forests of 1872, where an isolated town faced a horror even stranger than a missing child.